So this is against the Sophists. My name is Eduardo Pizarro. I'm from Team One, and I'm the discussion director. So for the first couple questions, I'm going to start off pretty simple. Some background on the Sophists. So who were the Sophists? Sophists were a group of educators and intellectuals in the 5th century BCE, obviously in ancient Greece. So what skills did the Sophists teach their students? They heavily focus their teachings on persuasive speech or rhetoric. Besides rhetoric, they focused on leadership skills, argumentation, and public speaking. So what views set the Sophists aside from other philosophical teachers? Like I mentioned, they focused heavily on teaching rhetoric and persuasive speech. They didn't teach general knowledge or ethics and morality. That's something, for example, Plato had a big problem with. They also didn't believe in objective truths or relativistic views. They thought truth and morality were subjective. And the reason that they chose to focus on rhetoric and persuasive speech is in order to give their students a chance of elevating their status in society. And obviously, rhetoric can propel you further in life. So question number 4, who is Isocrates and what was his relation with the Sophists? Not to be confused with Socrates. They're two different people, obviously. He was a Greek educator who also focused a lot of his teachings on rhetoric. He didn't fully agree with what the Sophists were teaching, and it's hard to actually know if Isocrates was a sophist himself. There were a lot of different resources I found online that some say that he did consider himself a sophist, some say that he didn't, others do consider him a sophist, and others don't. So again, it's pretty hard to tell if he was known as a sophist in that time. But Isocrates did share some similar views with the Sophists, but he ultimately criticized them on a lot of contradictory teachings and lack of wisdom. What other philosophers disagree with the Sophists? There were plenty of them. There were a lot of them that didn't agree with what they were teaching. For example, most notably Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, and as I just said, Isocrates. So why was Plato specifically against the Sophists? Like I said, since the Sophists just relied on teaching rhetoric and persuasive speech, Plato didn't agree with that because he thought that teaching genuine knowledge was more important than teaching rhetoric and persuasive language. Other than that, they obviously had a lot of different views and opinions, for example, on education, ethics, and morality. So speaking of ethics, were the Sophists considered ethical or not? Some were considered ethical. For example, Protagoras, he claimed to teach ethics and morality, but most Sophists only focused on teaching rhetoric. They didn't focus at all on teaching ethics and morality. They were also known to charge their students money, even though their teachings were considered invaluable. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell if everyone considered them unethical, but in the opinions of other philosophers, they were considered unethical. So, from the reading, what were some important points? I guess just the basics, just obviously seeing that Plato is against just teaching rhetoric and manipulative language, as also known as rhetoric. He, as I said, believes in teaching general knowledge, wisdom, objective truths, and teaching that over rhetoric is obviously more important and useful for the students, for their present and for their future, of course. Which takes us to question number 9. Would today's society agree with Plato or the Sophists? We live in a society where no one agrees on one thing. So I would say I don't know about 50-50, but if people have objective truths and they don't have relativistic views, I do think that they would agree with Plato. Um, you know, Vice versa, if they don't, they would agree with the Sophists. Like I said, opinions would vary today as us as a society as a whole can't seem to agree on anything. So I don't know if it would be 50-50, but some people would agree with one party and some people would agree with the other. So that's just the world we live in. And for the last question, what can we take away from the sophists? So I agree with teaching students or young people about rhetoric and persuasive language. It's something that could definitely propel you further in life. For example, in sales, if you are able to persuade the person you're trying to sell to, you're obviously going to be better at your job. So if you're a salesman or anything like that, you can definitely take away from the sophists, get better at persuasive language, rhetoric, being able to manipulate people with your words in order to sell a product. That's definitely something that you could take away from them. Again, I don't think that that should be the first and only thing to teach young people. They should definitely be in there, but that's something that I don't agree with the sophists on, is that that's what they focused on primarily, which I think it's something great to teach, but teaching core values and other more important things as the student, or how, no matter how old the student is, having a good core set of core values first before teaching persuasive language is more important, in my opinion, and overall knowledge and wisdom. Because if they don't have that, they're not going to be able to use that persuasive language in order to get ahead in life. So